Morning. Continuation on post-colonial criticism. We have been discussing two of the poems and many other literary writings by different writers, and how their own nationality, their own identity as a colonial or post-colonial affects the way they approach or they use this language of the colonizer, that is English, or even when they portray some other lands or people of another lands, another nations, how the portrayal itself is getting affected due to their identity of that kind. At a point they are colonized, and later they become post-colonial, or say at some point their nation, their own nation, their own country remained as a colonizer or colonized. Later they shift to post-colonial identity. So this is fluid. We cannot always fix upon that. And how it affects their own mindset, their own approach towards people, literature. That's what we are discussing. And how important language is in this, in such a discussion. We have to know how language itself is a tool. It's a second area of concern in the post-colonial criticism. And as this implies, he is being a member of the Protestant ruling class in Ireland, has a double identity as both colonizer and colonized. So he is a Protestant ruling class in Ireland. So being the Protestant or belonging to that particular ruling sector, Ireland, he can be taken, he is at that moment, or with that identity he is a colonizer, or he is holding power, he is a person who is holding power, or he belongs to the sector that holds power. But at the same time, I told you how Ireland is a nation who was once a colony of the empire, the British Empire. So he has this identity both as colonizer and colonized. And it is the recognition of such double identities. See, it's very important to note down. Double identities, which is one of the strengths of the post-colonialist view. So this is very strong an identity. See, the double identity is a matter that is to be discussed with the maximum concern. If you are discussing post-colonialism or post-colonial identity, how does this double identity come into being? What is the relevance of that? Let us discuss. Thus, the Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe, publishing his first novel, Things Fall Apart, in 1958, even the years of publication matter when you are discussing post-colonialism, because you know how the years in which certain nations, certain countries got freedom, the declaration of independence of different nations of the Asian or other Eastern Hemisphere. So he was, even Chinua Achebe, his Things Fall Apart was a post-colonial writing, as far as we know, and is criticized by an early reviewer for affecting to identify with the African villages when actually his university education and his broadcasting job in the capital city of Lagos should make him identify, it was implied, with the values of civilization supposedly brought to Africa by Europeans. What does it mean? Yeah, Chinua Achebe or most of the writers, even when they are holding the identity of belonging to a colonized nation. Say for example, India is a former colony of Britain. So we all are post-colonial in that regard. We are all staying after colonization experience. Though we didn't, we were not alive during that time. We didn't get birth during that time. Still, as a nation, if you collectively, if you talk about your own identity, we all are post-colonial. In the same way, Achebe was actually, he was writing about Things Fall Apart, as the center cannot hold. So the criticism is there in lieu of his university education. So this values of civilization was brought to Africa by Europeans, as Macaulay says in his minutes, that it is their duty to civilize these Indians, these barbarous Indians, to educate them, but their purpose was different. It's not because they were fond of Indians, they wanted to get education for Indians. They wanted us to be really in higher positions, professional and personal growth. That's not what they mean. They meant entirely something entirely different. They had their own purpose and aim for educating different Indians. Selected Indians. And many other nations also, they took the same stance of educating. You feel that, oh, they are really doing us some help, but they needed some people who are proficient in these two languages, who could take part of some of the official duties in the offices they established in India or any other colonized nation. So this is what they meant by educating some of the selected Indians or any Africans or wherever they settled, they established their colonies. So this is a criticism on this person, as Chinua Achebe took an exact stand of writing against the empire. He says things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Means it's about your empire is falling down, your centeredness is getting devalued. But the criticism leveled against him is it sounds funny. You are on university education, you are on broadcasting the proficient job in a capital city of Lagos. All those should make you committed towards the empire. So everything is brought to Africa by Europeans. That's why you also got education. So Achebe, you should not write in that way. You should always support the empire. This is the way they are criticizing, and a post-colonial person, a colonized subject, whether we experienced it or not, if you hold a bit of patriotic feeling, you can never support that empire or the rule of that time. Their colonization, that impact, the exploitation they imposed upon, the exploitation with which they had been making us suffer. So all these are there, and these people, even after that, even everyone can realize that they were not doing something good for us or any Africans or Indians, wherever they settled their colonies, established their colonies. The threat to subjectivity or life in general is really problematic. But they are claiming kind of respect, commitment on the part of the colonized subjects or post-colonial subjects, at least when they write something, at least when they sit to write something, historical or some of the literary portrayals even. They want us to write down, they want us to portray them in better fashion, as very elegant, cultured. We should not devalue them for any reason. This is what they expect for the education or some other. Yeah, they built railroads, they built good roads, bridges. For all these we should be committed to them. That's what they demand, or at least claim. They cannot demand anything any longer. But if you have the real picture of a colonization effect or colonization, the time of colonization, you can never justify or never support that. The treatment of every human being, or most of the human beings, especially the people belonging to the lower strata of the society, who are not financially sound, the suffering maximum. They never got this humane treatment, and still they are claiming this respect from us for doing all these things. That was for their purpose. They built bridges. They made good roads. All those, everything was not for the sake of development of the India or any other colonized nation, but for the sake of their own conveniences. Now, but you have HEB's paper, Colonialist Criticism in Literature in the Modern World. I think it's the name of the book. Literature in the Modern World is a book, should be in italics. Later in 1990s, you could see HEB's on maybe a reply or whatever. Every one of us has reasons and replies for whatever criticism it leveled against, for the writings, for open writings or criticisms against them. Because they were doing not something good, but they were harassing the nations, the colonies, the people there. So how do they claim that respect back? This emphasis on identity as doubled or hybrid or unstable is a third characteristic of the post-colonial approach. Reclaiming the past, then about language. Now we are talking about the doubled or hybrid or unstable identity. Is the third characteristic of the post-colonial approach. You are discussing this double identity, how it is possible, how each a person, one human being can take these two identities as a colonizer and colonized. To make it very clear, we can take the caste-wise differences in India or some of the religions in India or many others. See, every religion holds different sectors, and some of those sectors are more powerful. So India as a whole, if you take, all of us are post-colonial. At least our ancestors suffered the colonizing effect or the experience of the negative, bitter experience of colonization. But just because of that reason, you cannot say that there is no power related clash between the people of India. We do not share collective experience in financial status, professional grounds. Everywhere we are different. And the same way, different religions and different sectors, like caste-wise differences. There are hierarchy and power difference in the status, like some castes are given more prominence. It's labeled to be high caste, low caste. You are differentiating human beings on in these regards. And you all claim to be post-colonial. The same way, during that time in Ireland, Protestant ruling class, to which Yeats belonged, was holding a kind of power, and the other kinds of the same religion were comparatively holding a lower strata, lower status in the society. So obviously, already inside Ireland itself, you have difference in hierarchical order or the power structure. Power is in one way or other. You have a clash between the people of that nation itself. But as collectively as a nation, when Ireland was suffering or was facing colonizing experience, you have all the people over there holding the identity of post-colonial subject. So this is very important to be noted down. How you become double, you have hold a double identity, hybridity. What do you mean by hybrid? Nowadays we mention this term in terms of or in the context of the certain crops, hybrid. This is technique, the process with which we have different crows of different breeds or crops, plants. But hybridity in the sense of colonial is a post-colonial term. It's very urgent or important to be noted down. Hybrid. You cannot stand here or there. You hold one identity and the other at the same time. The same time you are, every Indian is post-colonial. But every one of us realizes that. Yes, inside India itself, power differences, caste-wise differences, creed-wise differences, sector different professionalism or many other differences you can note down in that regard as well. So see, unstable it is. Next day you are promoted to another profession. So that next you have been belonging to a subordinate sector in your professional institution, but next day you are promoted and then you become the power holder. So this is unstable. You cannot say that you will die as you are born. Every day, every moment situations change. Same with the unstable identity. So this is very important in post-colonialism. At one level, Achebe's use of a village Africa corresponds to its evocation of a pre-colonial mythological Ireland of heroes and heroines. Here Achebe, how he portrays that village of Africa in that novel, you please go and have an idea. So he is recollecting, he wants to bring that as a sense of nostalgic feeling. But at another level, the double or hybrid identity is precisely what the post-colonial situation brings into being. Double hybrid identity. Because it didn't mean to represent Byzantium, or at a surface level I told you Byzantium is portrayed with all due respect as a center of importance, learnedness, everything. But this is everywhere this is possible to come out, because you cannot always say that just being an Indian I am post-colonial throughout. If you are now holding the bourgeoistic stance, there you are away from the feeling of being a post-colonial. You are again exploiting some another working class. Even while holding the identity of a post-colonial just because of your being an Indian or African. So this is really important in post-colonialism to discuss double identity or hybridity or unstable identity. That stability, the lack of stability in your identity is very important notion in post-colonial criticism. The shifting attitudes in the 1980s and 1990s was towards post-colonial writers seeing themselves as using primarily African or Asian forms. Now, you see, note down the years 1980s and 1990s. Is a shift in attitude. And we will discuss the stance, the difference in the stance of these writers in 3 different stages. We will come to that. So what is this shift in attitude in the at a later time period like 1980s, 1990s? What do you see there? So these post-colonial writers seeing themselves as using primarily African or Asian forms supplemented with the European derived influences. Means, you are no longer derogating or sidelining your mother tongue, your own dialects, while writing literature. You are willing to write in your own way, your own language. But you are using African or see, it's not language is used with see English. If you are using, it's European language itself. But the forms, like you are highlighting African folk songs instead of using some classic epic style. You want to promote a theme. You have a subject matter. You have a theme at hand. It is before this time that we are referring now. They preferred to stick both to European language as well as the forms promoted by European or the Eurocentric literary types, genres like epic, novel. All these are European, all these are Western. But now you start promoting, and with the modernism itself, we know how high art and postmodernism, you know how they wanted to erase the differences between high art and low art. So you can see these people deliberately started promoting the folk culture or folk songs and many other regional literary types and writing it in English. So you are not completely throwing away that master language, the colonizer's language. So obviously to get it maximum reach, you have to use this language. And that is again taken as a strategy itself, not because you hold maximum respect for that language. No, unlike in the past where you are having fascination for the language and forms, everything that they do. You say that they are our foes, enemies, they colonized us, they did all they exploited us, every charge you level against them. But at the same time, you are inside out, you are fascinated for all their characteristic methods, ways, lifestyle, language, dress, culture, everything, even food culture. You are trying to imitate. So here, there is a difference or shift in this attitude where primarily you are using your own, just if an African writer is writing, if an African is writing, you are opting for such forms which are prominent in your own regional language and literature, like folk songs. A classicist, an English or a European never can appreciate that as he or she appreciates the sonnet or epic or many other literary types which they are already listed out, they have already listed out to be high efficient or worthy, elegant. So they have their own ideas about literature, literary creativity, different genre. So rather than, but now you are Asian or African forms you are primarily using, supplemented with European derived influences. Okay, you are not throwing complete influence or possibilities you derive from European literary circles, literary learning, exposure to that literature. You take that, but you do not profess a very straight due respect, unlike in the past. So rather than derived influence, rather than as working primarily within European genres like the novel and merely adding to them a degree of exotic Africanization. In the past we were doing that. Novel, okay, that is one of the major literary types, genre given by European literature, literary culture. So you are taking an African writer sitting to write, that theme, the characters, everything is maybe African. But you are not changing, you are not attempting any change in that form of the novel. You are not experimenting, you are not adding anything of your own. Rather than, but in the past it was like working primarily within European genre-like novel and merely adding to them a degree of exotic Africanization by representing some African characters. The main characters may be Africans, but that is not a shift in pattern, the form, nothing. You are just using that mold given by them and giving your own ideas or representation, portrayals. But what is your contribution? So inventing literary types also is very important. Otherwise, what about haiku? Now we have haikus. Think about a classic time when a writer brings haiku, comes with a haiku. He or she never gets any appreciation because, oh, 2 or 3 lines, how do you call it a piece of literature? This is why talking the stands of them before some 10 centuries. They wanted epic length publication, they wanted this and this, a particular kind of hero. They wanted the length and meter, everything to be in certain fixed molds. But now we are taking a different stand. When we talk about Africa, you can think about Indians as well. You know how Indian folk arts and all are really valuable, really valid. We don't give much importance to that, or we fail to notice down the worth of that. But there are even Westerners at present who are coming and researching our Indian folk culture, folk style, everything. Because that is something new to them. And we have our own pattern, we have the claim. Indian culture, Indian tradition, Indian literature, Indian forms, African forms. So that is our contribution. Unlike you are taking or you are adopting the form of novel and just representing or just giving your themes through that. It's a post-colonial stand. You have to do something different. Just wait. All post-colonial literatures, it might be said, yes, seem to make this transition at one stage or another. That's why it is shown like in 1980s to 1990s. Some post-colonial nation, some post-colonial writers take the stance immediately. Some of them take time to make this transition, but at least this is an audacious stand, very courageous or very appreciable stand on their part, that you are contributing in your own way. They begin with an unquestioning acceptance of the authority of European models. Yeah, first thing, it is about unquestioning acceptance of the authority of European models. Like you are using it very directly without making any change. The first stage of post-colonial writing looks like this. You will be able to trace back these 3 stages which I am going to talk about, along with the 3 stages of evolutionary that evolve with the stages of evolution of female literary tradition. You have that 3 stages, phases, like you have with the 3 different names it is given there. With Elaine Showalter differentiates the 3 stages. Hope you remember that, and we will discuss that after my talking about this. In feminism, you might have come across this already. Yeah, in the last session I discussed it. Anyway, with that theory itself, you have that to be discussed. So these 3 stages in post-colonialism itself, let me discuss first, and after that we will go to this. First, it is unquestioning acceptance of the authority of European models, especially in the novel. Novel was a very fascinating, one of the fascinating literary types for every creative writer of that time, and with the ambition of writing works that will be masterpieces entirely in this tradition. Exactly to now write your masterpieces, fitting, you are just pouring your your matter into the mold given by the Europeans or the colonizers. European models you are ultimately taking, and there is no shift you are trying to make. So this can be called the adopt phase of colonial literature. Adopt, which the third term is adopt. Since the writer's ambition is to adopt the form, what do you mean by adopting? You are taking, you are trying to take that completely. Adopting children, you know what they are doing. You are completely taking them. You are taking them fully well. So adopt the form as it stands, the assumption being that it has universal validity. So at the first stage, these post-colonial writers are not actually developed as per the demands of a post-colonial identity and its subjectivity. We have to fight back. Our writing, our criticism, the purpose is to write back, to question the authority, not to not to stick to them and to sail in the same boat. But that's what was happening in the or at the first stage of this post-colonial writing or colonial literature. So adopting, even though you are a post-colonial writer, even though you belong to a colonized nation, you cannot completely do justice to your writing. You are taking the European model as such, as given. So its assumption being that it has universal validity, that European literature, European type, European literary genre that is having a universal validity. So why should we try with our regional ways, regional literature? This doesn't. At least they are unable or not courageous, not willing to take risk by experimenting with the forms. Then the second stage, we just try to recollect it with the feminist, these three stages. As Elaine Showalter talks about, we will discuss that after talking about three stages in colonialism, otherwise it will confuse you, that's why. So the second stage can be called the adapt stage, adapt phase. Adapt. First is adopt, second is adapt. What is the feature, what is the characteristic feature of that stage? Let us discuss. Since it aims to adapt the European form to African subject matter. Adapt the European form to African subject matter. The first one is even the character representation of characters, even you are choosing from European culture. Yes, you are writing as a post-colonial subject, you are writing. That's the only contribution. Okay, at least you are writing. That itself is a very different, very important stage. To bring difference, at least you should start writing. You should start something. Think about the concept of Adukkalayil ninnu Arangathekku. So starting something is very important. After that only you can bring a rebellion, writing back stance, questioning the authority. All those will have to occur, but the starting is very important, and in that regard adopt stage also is important. So being a repressed community, from there you start writing, you start representing your community, your own existence, you claim your existence there, you mark down your existence there, that we belong to this nation. Yes, we are capable of writing, unlike you told about us. Or unlike you label us to be cultureless, illiterate mass, anonymous mass. We are not anonymous. I have an identity as a writer. He has an identity as a writer. She has an identity as a writer. So that itself is very important as stand. In that regard, first stage is important. But they are not taking any rebellious stand. But the second stage is adapting. What do you mean by adapting? You adapt the European form to African subject matter. There only you start writing, you start representing your people, your community. Think about my writing a novel. In my novel, I took the characters, the name, even the selection of the name and the context is very important. I named my character, the first character, the main character in my novella. She is not a woman to be Aishi. The male hero to be Akhilan. Instead of that, if I select Alex, Maria, for the other names like Macaulay, if I name my character, my main character to be Elizabeth, there is a politics behind everything, every selection even. Elizabeth, if I am still fond of that tune, that European culture or their names only, I feel that, oh, Indian names, no, good for nothing. Let me take some other names like that. If I don't select, there is a politics behind that. I am again asserting my post-colonial identity. I love my nation, the names belonging, the types of name belonging to my nation. Types of name which are fine for the people belonging to India. Malayalam name that has something to do with my own language, Malayalam, Akhilan. It doesn't have anything to do with English actually. The term, Aishi. Okay, we have that name, but it's more suitable if I take Ammu. It's a name which is more suitable. When Arundhati Roy takes Ammu, Esther, Rahel, but the main title Ammu. It's a mixing of different kinds of characters. In her God of Small Things, we have number of characters available there. From see, you have multiple characters from different national identities. You have Baby Kochamma, Chako. All those characters are very important, and they are mixing up in Indian context is even more important. How to know? You have to read the novels. Exactly find that you read such novels, which represent the heterogeneous types of living and communities of Indian context, Indian post-colonial Indian context. So this adapt phase is, you adapt the European form to African subject matter. Your subject matter, the characters you represent, everything is African, but at least the novel form is taken there. The second phase is just about the novel or the major forms of English writing style, the European style, European literary domain you are taking, but your subject matter is everywhere you try to represent African life, African culture, Indian life, Indian culture, everything. Thus assuming partial rights of intervention in the genre. So that, when Arundhati Roy brings songs in Malayalam inside the novel, there is Endada Parangacha, all those, you have a song there, it's very short, if short, though short, you have Malayalam terms, Malayalam short composition in the English novel itself, so that you are representing, you are asserting your identity, you are asserting your that post-colonial identity with due respect. Yes, in my English novel, let there be a Malayalam word, term. It's a post-colonial stand in writing. Every time when I write something in English, at least when we write for the magazine, I deliberately add Malayalam sentences there. It's a deliberate on my part that my language is important. My language is important. I do love that. So inside, at least in a write-up in English, I am proud to bring my language, my mother tongue. So this is deliberate on the part of the post-colonial writers. Second stage is even far advanced than the first one, where you are not doing subservient observing of English style, English language. Everything is there kept intact in first stage. You are using English language, you are using the colonizers' language and the forms. But the second stage, you can see the form is taken, you are using the language as well if you want. But you start representing your own culture, your own region, your own people with due respect. That is important. It's unlike you are representing with a sense of, oh, is this kind of a representation, that kind of a way of living, why should I represent it in my novel? Not with such a stand you are trying to represent, but you're bringing the culture of Africa and India. It's visible to the reading public. Okay, let the Europeans also read, because I am writing in English. It is for maximum reach. Using English language for you, selecting that global languages or the languages with the maximum wide reach is another political stand. Political in the sense, it's a positive sense you have to take. There is a strategy behind all this. So you may be thinking, if she adds Malayalam sentences in between, why doesn't she write all those in Malayalam itself? So the writing preference, your preferable language to express, that also vary according to subjects or people. It means your proficiency, your confidence in writing in one language may not be the same in another language. Now, just because of your being Malayalis doesn't assure that you are proficient in writing literature. Writing literature in a particular language is it is not implied, or it is not available just with your proficiency in the language. That is another thing. But here you are discussing the second stage where you are adopting the form, European form, but you are using that to represent your own culture, your own subject matter. So partial rights of intervention in the genre. There is an intervention, there is something you attempting on your part to make a difference. In the final phase, the third phase, we will have to think back about feminist female literary tradition with a Showalter in this regard. We will go back to that. In the final phase, there is, so to speak, a declaration of cultural independence. Next page, 23, page number 23 of the file. Independence whereby African writers remake the forms to their own specification without reference to European norms. It's a declaration. The third stanza is very important. It's titled to be, it's named to be adapt phase. So it's a declaration of cultural independence whereby African writers remake the form to their own specification. Even the form is changed according to your specification. You bring folk songs in between. Exactly what Arundhati Roy did with Malayalam songs in between. Who told that novel should be prose-like every time? You can bring poem. You can bring a prose-like piece, prose-like part in poetry. So you are inventing, you are adding your own ideas, you are bringing something new to you, the forms which are there in Europeanism, European literary tradition. You are remaking it. You are not sticking to that in a subservient manner. This is an adept phase, since its characteristic is the assumption that the colonial writer is an independent adept. The assumption that communication is like a colonial writer is an independent adept. In the form, not a humble apprentice. Actually, it should be post-colonial, right? So, adept in the form, not a humble apprentice. You are not humbly taking an apprenticeship of what they have given, and you are not pouring your material into that. You are no longer using that mold in the very way they have given that, or you have been availed it with. The first phase or a mere license as in the second. So, as in the first phase, or a mere license as in the second. Second phase, you can see it's just as a license. Yeah, and still you are observing their rules and structures. The first phase, there is nothing as like, even license is not there, you are, yeah, just taking and just finishing your work as demanded by the European ITLs. So, this stress on the cross-cultural interactions is a fourth characteristic of post-colonialist criticism. That is, you have cross-cultural interaction, you have the access to their language, their models, their forms, but you are adding your own contribution to that. You are contributing, you are inventing types, literary methods, strategies, everything. And I would like to read out the three phases, which the reference is here itself, like a Showalter, who is giving a three compartmentalizing of female literary tradition, of the woman literary tradition, like feminine phase. First one, you are imitating the dominant male artistic norms in that phase. Actually, I hope you remember the time period, like 1840s to 1880s. The first phase is feminine. The second phase is feminist, with the 1880s to 1920s, feminist. There is a radical separatist position there, with a kind of attempt for something different. And the last stage, hope you remember, it is from 1920, it's 1920 onwards. That was the way it is given, it is the way it is given to you. Actually, it's about, you are completely declaring a freedom, you are looking at the specific female experiences. So, how you can connect with these three stages, like adopt, adapt, then adapt. Adopt, adapt, and adapt. Three terms should not be confused. And this is the same way we have this order in feminism, like feminist literary tradition, like feminine, feminist, and female in the order. You cannot reverse, or you cannot shift, mark a shift in this order. It should be like adopt, adapt, then only adapt. It's very important. You cannot discuss it in the reversal order or anything. Okay, so that's all with that part. And one more paragraph is remaining under that particular title. Before that, we have to finish off one more paragraph. I think is feminist post-colonialism. Cross-cultural interaction. After it's a page number 189 of the text. It's not just one paragraph, one more pages to be there to finish off before we reach to stop and think section. After that, we have the title, what post-colonial critics do. Then the last part, it's post-colonial criticism, an example. So, we are discussing all these under the title, main subtitle, post-colonial reading. I have discussion on different writers. Then we come to the discussion of post-colonial phases, different phases in post-colonial writing. Later we will go to the other terms and major ideas in post-colonialism within the same session itself. So thank you so much for joining. Okay.